So let us look at our preparation for Easter. And Father Pius Parsh, in his book on the liturgy, his series on the liturgy, speaks about there being 3 levels to this preparation for Easter. There's Septuagesima, which is the first level, the 3 weeks of pre-Lent, in which we consider Adam, Noah, and Abraham, the 3 patriarchs, in the early book of Genesis. And then the second part is Lent. And we're in the middle of Lent now, because you have the first 4 weeks of Lent, and then you have 2 weeks of Passiontide, which is the 3rd level of gradation or graduation in this procession toward Easter. So now we are in the middle of these 4 weeks of Lent. Now the first week of Lent is about bodily fasting, suppressing vice, doing penance. And in the first Sunday of Lent, we see that Christ fights against the devil who is trying to tempt him after he has been fasting for 40 days. Now, in that sense, we could say that our Lord is passive against the devil, whereas in today's gospel, he's aggressive against the devil. He attacks the devil and he drives him out. And so that signifies also a transition for us in our Lent. Now, we've been fasting and doing penance for 2 weeks, or we say that we have been. Hopefully we have been. We said that we were going to. And how is that going? How are your Lenten penances going? Because hopefully now you can graduate to this next stage where you are more able to enter deeply into your Lenten practice now that you've gotten your Lenten penances and disciplines to be a little bit more habitual. And now you can make some real progress in the spiritual life. In 2 weeks then, we will focus on the Passion of Christ. So this really is our opportunity these next 2 weeks. If you've not already gotten serious about your Lent, well, you're a little behind, but Lent is long. And it's long for a reason. And so St. Maximus the Confessor writes this about the length of Lent. He warns us that we must not regret or fret over the length of Lent. For the longer these days of our fasting, then the greater the grounds for our forgiveness. The longer the time of our self-denial, the greater the price paid for our soul's salvation. And the severer the treatment of our wounds, the more sure the healing of our offenses. For God, who is the physician of our souls, has instituted an appropriate time. It is sufficient for the just to make reparation and for sinners to ask for mercy. The just praying for peace and the sinners imploring pardon. So now we think about these 6 weeks of Lent. Lent and Passiontide. And the length of our doing penance can become tiring. Maybe it's not become tiring yet. Maybe you haven't really gotten started yet. But by the end of Lent, you will be tired of your penances, and you will be ready for Easter. I hope you'll be tired of your penances. I hope you'll be doing sufficient to be tired of your penances, because they are salutary. They work toward our salvation, and they are good for our souls, and they make reparation for the sins, not only our own sins, but reparation for sins committed all over the place. Now this number 40 then is mystical and salutary in itself, because the flood that Noah went through, the flood that destroyed all life other than Noah and his family and the animals that were on the ark, that flood, the rain fell for 40 days and 40 nights. And Moses fasted for 40 days and 40 nights before receiving the law, and Elias fasted for 40 days and 40 nights before being taken up in the fiery chariot. Our Lord fasted for 40 days and 40 nights in the desert before being tempted by the devil. So this is a mystical number, and it is a number that God has ordained. And so we embrace these 40 days, And it is such a blessed time. Now in the gospel today, our Lord warns us that a house divided against itself will fall. But we might note, and St. Maximus the Confessor notes this, that during the flood, during those 40 days, God divided the just from the unjust, and he separated the good from the bad. And so a house within itself cannot be divided. But those who are within the house, within the church, within your family, we have to guard against divisions, against unforgiveness, against arguments, against disobedience. And we need to keep concord within our families, within our own households, and certainly within the church, because the church cannot be divided. A kingdom divided against itself will fall. Well, the church cannot be divided. So if you disagree with the church, well, you better either agree with the church or realize that you're not going to be part of it. There cannot be division in the church. It is one perfectly. So you're either within the church or you're without the church. Let us apply that then to our family lives. Spouses, you have to be a united front for your children. You have to be. And you cannot get divorced. There is no such thing as divorce in marriage, because you can't get divorced from God. God is the spouse. You can't get divorced from God, and woe to the person who does get divorced from God. Then what? Who is your spouse if it's not God? So husbands and wives, you have to get along. And wives, you have to understand that your husband is the spiritual head of the family. And husbands, you have to understand that you cannot be a tyrant, and that you have to be a gentle ruler and speak truth with love, and you have to rule with humility. But wives and children, you have to recognize that, well, Dad might make some mistakes or might make some decisions that don't turn out as well as you hoped or as well as he hoped, but even so, you have to support him in that. And you'll all suffer together through those bad decisions. But you have to suffer as one and be sympathetic toward Dad if he makes a bad decision. And, those things happen. But we have to stick together in our families. We have to stick together in the church, because a house divided will fall. Well, the church can't fall in her divinity, but among us human beings who are part of the church, boy, can we fall. And that is what these 40 days of Lent are to help us with. Because when we are fasting, when we are doing penance, and when we are spending extra time in prayer and spiritual reading, and giving alms, and doing good works, maybe even gaining some plenary indulgences for the Jubilee, well, that makes reparation. That heals the wounds. And that keeps us afloat, hopefully for the next year. We can't sustain a high level all year round, but we can sustain it for 40 days at a time. So make the most of this Lent. We're halfway through the 4 weeks of Lent, and then we still have the 2 weeks of Passiontide after that. So a month to go. Persevere. This is a time of great grace. Do not let the devil take over your Lent. Drive him out by your fasting and your prayer and your almsgiving. Unite yourself with Christ through the sacramental life. Go to confession. Receive Holy Communion in a state of grace. And let this mystical and salutary time of 40 days be truly life-changing for you every year. Nomine Patris et Filii et Spiritus Sancti. Amen.